Hello, this is Trevor, and today we're taking a small break from the Web Security Academy to build a custom Burp extension. So I was recently on an engagement that had an interesting authentication protocol and process. So I built a similar site, which you see here, thanks to this free template from HTML5Up. Using, their template and some Python, I was able to get a close approximation to the authentication process in this site. So if I go to menu and I click log in, and there's a user Greg with a password of password, so I'll log in. This red text here, this means I was successfully authenticated and can see sensitive info, right? So everything looks, nothing new there, I guess. But if we look, there's no cookies. Let me show you what we did here. We go to, here's where we got the home page. See that no cookies were issued. And then we did a post to the login, or we got the login site right here. Again, no cookies. We did a post, but look, this is API login. So this was done in JavaScript, and we know that because this is JSON formatted, username and password, and the response is also JSON. Here we receive a token with an JWT token, right? So how do we use that? If we look at get protected, we can see it's not included here. If we look at the response, that red text that I was showing you, this is sensitive info, you notice that that is not here also. But everything else on that page is all the, not sensitive information. And then if we look at this request, this get API protected, you notice that it has an authorization bearer header with that JWT token as the in that header, right? And the response includes another JSON with the sensitive information. Hope that all made sense. If we send this to repeater, let me show you this first. If I inspect and go to storage, in the session storage, we can see here's where that token is stored. So it's not in cookies, it's in session storage. And if I screw up, just type in some random letters here to make this token invalid, save that. I think I saved it, right? Let me just do it again. Yeah, I did. Okay. And then hit refresh here. You notice how we're kicked back out to the login page. And looking at the requests, get API, we got an invalid token. And then the next request was a get to login. So that's what we're working with, right? And imagine being on this assessment and you need to do, a good thorough job. So how do we deal with the API, the authorization bearer token in the session storage area, which it's no longer there, it's been deleted. How do we deal with that? Well, I chose to write a quick, easy, Burp extension that was custom to this, that allowed me to automatically replace any authorization bearer token if it was missing or if it was invalid, like say it had expired. The way I did that is using macros and the extension. So let's set everything up first, and then we can move into the extension code to get that part set up. The first thing I want to do is I want to include this. I'm going to add it to scope so that this, it's in the suite scope, right? Now I'm going to go to project options and sessions, and then I'm going to add a macro. The first macro I'm going to do is the login macro. So I'm going to get the login page, which is right there, and then I'm going to get this post API login. I'm selecting both. This doesn't have it, but imagine if there's like a CSRF token or something we need to derive from getting the login page. That's kind of what I'm simulating here. Again, I'm not going to derive anything from this, and it's not required. So I'm going to do OK here now that I've selected those two. This is where I'd configure any parameters I need to derive. I'm going to change the name to login, so I know this is the macro for the login. And the post receives that JSON object with the JWT. So let's test this. I expect to get 2 200s, and in the last one, a new JWT. That looks great. I do receive that. Everything is fine there. So I'm going to do OK. Say that one is good. Next, I want to set up session handling rules. So I want to know when the token is invalid, right? Let's look at this one, and we can see that this text is returned in the body if the token is invalid. So I'm going to copy that out. Go back to project options. I'm going to add something here. Let's call this re-login. I'm going to go to scope, make sure this is use suite scope, which I had already set that up. So that's good. Now I'll go back to details, and I'm going to add some rule actions. Check session is valid. This is what I want this rule to do. So I'm going to issue the current request, and I'm going to examine the response, right? I don't want to look at the URL of the redirection target. I want to look in the response body, and I'm going to look for, I'm going to paste that phrase that I copied. So if the response body has invalid token, and I want to look for a literal string, the other option is regex. We have an option of sensitivity, whether it's case sensitive or not. It doesn't matter, but I'll choose not case sensitive. And the match indicates for me that if I receive invalid token, I'm going to say that it is invalid. So if the session is invalid, I want to run a macro, and I want to run that login macro that we had just created that gets a new JWT. I am not going to update the request with parameters, and I'm not going to update the request with cookies. Neither of these really apply to this. What I want to do is, after running the macro, invoke a burp extension action handler. Nothing's here yet. This is what we need to create, and this is where it's going to integrate into our authentication process. And the way it does that is we're going to run a macro, right? The last response is going to have that JSON object with the JWT as the value for the token key, right? Here, we're going to say get that JWT from the macro, and then the first request, I want you to replace or insert the authorization header with the new JWT. That's the job of what we're going to do for the burp extension. So I'm going to leave this blank for now because we need to create this and do OK. But we have a good idea of what we want it to do. Everything else looks fine. I'm going to do OK. And let's go to extender. So this is where we're going to add our extension. If you don't have it already, I'm going to write it in Python. You will need to make sure your Jython, Jython environment is set up, ready to go. Like I said, I already have it. It's ready. So I can just continue to add. Before we get started, we need to know how we write the extension. Here is the main website I want to point you to. It's Portswigger Burp Extender, right? This will have a lot of links to some stuff that will be very helpful while you're doing this. Specifically, I'm going to go to extensibility, and I'm going to open this one, writing your first Burp Suite extension. I'm also going to open up API documentation and sample extensions. Sweet. So this is a tutorial on a very simple burp extension, but it'll get us started, right? Again, I'm going to write mine using Python. So I'm going to select that here, and we can, just start writing this. So let's just do it. Let's start with plain Jane this. We're going to call this JSON bearer token.py. All the code for both the application and the extension will be on my GitHub page. I'll put a link in the description to that. Let me fix up the indents here. So we have an import for iBurp Extender. We have a class we're naming Burp Extender. We're taking this one. I don't know if the parameter. No, this is a parent class, iBurp Extender, as input. And then we're defining one method here called register extender callbacks. And that is it. Let's walk through a little bit. So I don't intend for this video to be really a tutorial. I figure what my intention is to show you what I did. I know that's not necessarily as useful as a tutorial for someone who's never done it, but I think it's better than nothing, and I don't have the time really to do a full tutorial right now. So please understand that this is it. We're not going to do with that in mind, we're not going to do this because that's it. This is all they have. There's some other stuff here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to remember, I got to this page by going extensible sample extensions. Here's the extensions. If you look here, this is what we want. Working with custom session tokens that Burp normally doesn't understand. And that's really what we want. So I'm going to click on the Python one, session tokens. I'm going to go to raw, and this will be our starting point. So it has a bunch more boilerplate code, but it gets us a lot further, faster. Let's put that right here. And we're going to delete what we started with. There. I'm going to add 2 line breaks here and 2 line breaks there. We don't need this or this. We do need a couple of names. So we need an extension name. Name. This will be what we want the name of this extension to show up like in Burp. I think I'll call it JSON bearer token. That's fine. We need remember I told you that action name, so let's call it action name. And we'll call it replace bearer token. That's fine. I'm going to just comment this part out. Oh, no, we need that. New line bytes. That'll be fine. Burp extender. So we need this iSession handling action. This is how we're going to register it. Okay, register extender callbacks. This is that boilerplate, self callbacks, helpers, callbacks, get helpers. You know, one thing, oh, here's where we set the extension name. There's one thing I want to add to this section. So I'm going to do ext name here. We want to register session handling action. That's perfect. I want to add some handlers for the standard out and standard error. Sorry. I'm going to do that right here. Save references for standard out and standard error. To do that, I'm going to do self.standardout equals print writer. I'll need to import that. Callbacks dot get standard out true, and we need another one for error. There, get standard error. Up here, I'm going to do right there from java.io import print writer. Boom, we've got that. To test it, let's do self.standardout.println loaded successfully. I hate spelling that word on camera. Okay. Now that we've done that, I'm going to comment out basically everything else from here on, because that's enough to get us started, and I think without errors. Right? Looks good. Okay, so we're gonna go here. I'm gonna do add. I'm gonna do Python, select file, Baya, and JSON bearer token. Okay, next. Loaded successfully, but we have errors. Uh-oh. What do we have? Not implemented Burp Extension. Oh, we don't have enough. We need a get action method, which we commented out right here. Let's, this is the name. So we're gonna, instead of a string, we're gonna return the action name. And we may need this one. Let's just add pass for now, just so we can get past loading it and unloading it. So I'm going to unload it by unchecking it, and then load it again. Loaded successfully, this time without errors. Sweet. All right, let's, so get action name. That's fine. Everything here is fine. This is where we're going to register what we want added. So we want a session handling action. That's going to make it available. Remember that checkbox I showed? This is what's going to say our extension should be listed there. By running this, this is what it's going to be named, which we moved up here, replace bearer token. And here's where we actually do the stuff. As you can see, we get 3 items. We have the class reference, a current request. So this is the request that received the invalid token response. So its token is no longer valid. This is the macro items will be a list of all the macro requests and the responses from those macros. So if you remember, we had in our macro, let me go there, progress, login. We had 2 requests. So this will have information about both those requests and responses here. I believe both requests and responses. It will have 2 items. Perfect. I'm going to delete this. If, for instance, we have 0 items, we'll just return extract response headers. We are not going to be extracting response headers, so I can remove that comment. Final response equals macro items length get response. So this is getting the response of the last macro item. This is not Pythonic. So let's clean this up a little bit, because we can just do -1 here to get that last item. And just to show you, A equals 1, 2, 3. And if I do A -1, we get the last item of that list with just -1. Perfect. If it doesn't exist, we're going to do, we're going to return right here because we can't move forward, right? Here is where we kind of deviate a little bit from what they're doing, because they're looking in their headers and ours, like they're looking for this key or this header name and getting the value of whatever's there. We can't do that because ours, 1, isn't in the headers. 2, it's a JSON object. So this part of the code we are not going to use. I'm going to keep it there just in case it has some info that we find useful and want to duplicate. Here I'm going to do, we want to extract JWT from macro response, right? We've got the final response already. We want the macro, or we want the final response info. To do that, we'll do self.helpers, kind of the same right here. Helpers.analyze response, final response. And we want, instead of get headers, we want get, wait, no, we don't need that. We already have the response, so we're just analyzing the response here. This will be filled with all of the response info. Sweet. We need to get the response by body, so final response body equals, here's where we need to do final response. We're going to get the whole response, and then we're going to use the info we got here, which is final response info dot get body offset. So this is saying where the body starts, that offset, and we're going to get that to the end. So this is using Python slicing. Start where the offset, where whatever is returned from this method, get body offset, and get until the end, and that should be the body of our response, right? Now we need, now that we have the body, we can try to turn that from just text into a JSON or a Python dictionary using the JSON library in Python, right? if we do json.load, this should read bytes, which is the default with Burp. So I'm going to try this, and I honestly don't know if it's going to work. In the one I didn't do this. I turned it into a string and then tried to load it, or loaded it using whatever. So this is the JSON object equals this, and then the bearer token equals JSON object, and let's see what this is named. Post. No, we want post. We want the response token. So token. I don't like having this string here, so let's add that as a global variable. Let's say JSON key equals token, and we're going to change this to JSON key. We've got an error here and an error there. This one is because we don't have import JSON. I'm going to add a space. There we go. And bearer token. So let's stop there, print it out, and see how we did. So we need to do self.standardout.println. And we cannot do F strings in Jython, this version of Jython, so no F strings. Bearer token, and we'll just do like this, dot format, bearer token. Perfect. And then we'll leave everything else. So we don't have any like protection. If we crash, we don't have any try catches or, you know, anything here to protect us. But that's okay. And this is going to keep erroring out. And this is because I use black to auto format and make it pretty. And it wants a space here, probably because a space after the call. But pip or one of the standards doesn't want that space, so they're kind of fighting with each other. So I'm just going to do no QA on that line so we don't see the error. All right, so this is what I expect to have happen now. Since we registered it, I expect to be able to see the name that we call this action right here in that drop-down list. We're going to select that and make it, enable it. Then as we send a request that has an invalid token, what I hope is that we get this line printed out with a valid token. Once we get to this point, then we can look at replacing it. Hope that makes sense. All right, so let's go to extender. I'm going to unload and then load because we made changes. Loaded successfully, no errors. I'm going to leave this open, and I am going to go to project options. I'm going to edit this one, scroll down to the bottom, check this box, and there's our, ooh, that's cool. So it's now showing up here. I'm going to do OK. And I'm going to check, make sure that repeater is checked. It is. Everything's good there. So I'm going to do OK here. Now I'm going to go to proxy, and I want to send this to repeater. This is one with an invalid token. We saw that as the response. So I'm going to send it here, see what we get. Invalid token, we got an error. JSON load. Okay, so unfortunately, we weren't able to use load to read this. Let's try, we can fix that. Told you I didn't know if it would work. Turns out it didn't. So I'm going to do S here, and that means we need to turn this into a string. So final response string equals self.helpers.bytes to string final response body there, and I'm going to change word string. These are terrible variable names, and I apologize. I'm really not good at that part of programming. So back here we want extender uncheck because we made changes. Check. Loaded, no errors. We'll leave this open. We'll go back to repeater and send it. Ooh, we did not get any errors. Yes, look at that. Bearer token, and we got the JWT. That is freaking awesome. So now that we have that, all we need to do is replace the original request with this, the header with this new token, right? In the sample code, this is all them just getting. This is a good check here. So I can do the same thing if not bearer token, meaning it's couldn't be found, will return. So I could also do, I don't know, there's lots we could do. We could do try here just in case the thing doesn't work. Let's add the try. Try. And we'll do except. This is going to be a key error most likely. And we'll do return. We can do the self.standardout.println. Do we want standard out? We can do standard error. Bearer new JWT was not found. And then we'll exit. If, and then here, so if there wasn't a key error, we need to check if bearer token, we can do the same, is none. Self.standard error.println JWT. We can do the exact same, in fact. Was not found, and then we'll exit. Sweet. Okay. I just saw them, adding some script protection and thought that was a good idea. So we need this part. So I'm gonna uncomment all of this because this is the stuff we need. Self.helpers.self. Okay. So what this is doing is getting the index of what they had up here. It's no longer there. Length of request. Index of. So it's defining the start and the end of this. And then it replaces it probably here. So instead of session ID key bytes, we want, let's do header auth header name equals, we want authorization. Do we want bearer space? Let's see. So authorization bearer. Let me just copy this just to make sure I didn't misspell it. What do we want here? So I guess what I'm asking myself, do I want the space? Do I want bearer to be included? that kind of stuff. And then we need auth header bytes equals, and we'll do the same byte array of auth header name. That's what we're going to put here. Change word to auth header bytes. So that's going to get the start. The end is going to be the first new line. We can just name this authorization. So with that in mind, let's just do authorization. Do we want the colon? Let's say no. Okay. Back down here. Auth header bytes, new line. That looks good. Now we're doing the replacing. It says glue together first line, session token header, and rest of request. Perfect. So current request, set request 0 to our start, plus string to bytes, and then we're inserting what we want here. So let's delete all of this. Well, session ID key. So this is a string and the token will be a string too. That's all I need to know. I'm going to delete all to here because I'm going to use format. So we want auth, and let me again copy it because I don't want to do a spelling mistake here. Space, and then here is where we're going to insert the token. So I can do dot format, and we called it bearer token. So it takes the start, replaces the start and end with what we have here, and then goes from the end to the rest of the current request. And that's how we modify the current request. Awesome possum. Man, I think this is done. So let's give it a try. First thing we need to do is go to extender. Boom. We need to unload this Python. Load it again because we did make changes. Make sure we have no errors. We don't. We can go to repeater. This is the one that is messed up. Invalid token. Let's send it. Ooh, look at this. We got it. And we got a new token. We can remove this if it prints too much. But the secret token is here. And to illustrate that a bit more, I'm going to close this window. I'm going to mess up the token again. I'm going to go to project options. I'm going to open sessions tracer. This is running now, so any session stuff should show up here. Go back to repeater. This is the one I messed up, and I'm going to send it. Okay, so let's take a look at what we got. So applying rule relogin. This is the one that checks if this session is valid. So it's checking here, issued current request to validate session. The response came back saying it's invalid. So it determined the session is invalid, right? Let me make this a little bit bigger. So we told it to run a macro, and that macro was log in. It did the get to the login page and then the post with the username and password. As a response to that, it got the new JWT, and then we told it to run our session handling action because we registered that to change the current request and issued request. So This, you can see, is the new token that we received here. So like CI0IJ blah, blah, blah. And boom, that's all the exact same. The signature is going to change more than the header. I should have done it. So MCS3 and response MCS3. Awesome. So I really like this. It was a good challenge. Let's review just what we did first. So we went to project options, right? The first thing we did was we created a macro for logging in. We selected both the get and the post, and then made sure that these were successful and that in the last response included the new JWT token that we needed. Then we created a session handling rules. We called it relogin. For this, we checked if this current session is valid. To do that, we issued the current request and monitored the response. We looked in the response to see if it included this text, invalid text in the response body. If it did, then we knew that the token was invalid. And by the way, be careful with the response body. Imagine a website where it uses invalid token as a normal part of the response. It would get flagged as invalid token when it's really not. So keep that in mind. I don't have to worry about it for this demo site though. We looked for a literal string. So like to be, extra careful, we could do JSON formatting with the double quotes. We could do regex formatting to make it, you know what I'm saying, to make it more safe. So we looked for the literal string. We decided case insensitive was fine, and that if this was found, it would be considered an invalid session. So once we had an invalid session, we needed to tell it what to do. We told it to run a macro. The macro we wanted to run was the login macro. This got the JWT token as the last response. We didn't update any of the original requests with any of the information we received. What we did is run a extension action handler called replace bearer token. And then once we did this, the next request went through. So I'm going to go do OK here, and let's review the code. So we made some global variables with all the stuff that is likely to change between implementations. We set up some boilerplate and registered the session handling action. This was important. We gave it a name, and then we told it what to do in this perform action method. We made sure that we received at least, one macro item, and then we took the last item and got the response from that. We used a burp helper called analyze response to get the response info. From that, we could tell where the body starts and then created a variable starting at that start point to the end, and that ended up being our response body. Once we had that, we turned it from a bytes array to a string, used JSON to load that in as a string into a Python dictionary. Once we had a dictionary, we were able to pull out the specific key that we were looking for, and we were looking for a key named token. We saved that as a variable here, and then we took the current request. This was the original request that failed. Found out where the authorization header started and ended, or we could just add it in, and let me remind me right after this, we'll try it without. And then we added our authorization bearer token with that JWT that we pulled, and then resent the request. Ooh, so very cool. Let me just show you, even if we don't have this, it should still work fine. And it did not. Well, that's lame. That's disappointed. Let's see why. So, projects options, I thought I was done. And it just keeps pulling me back in. Session is valid. Throw 'em by handling. So it is our replace function. It's because this is not found. Hey, I took a pause there, but I made some changes to the code to add in the authorization bearer token header if it doesn't exist. So what I did was, first I moved the definition of the new header up here so it could be used in both. I have the first session start key start here. This will return a -1 if this auth header is not found. And so here I test if it's greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, I process it like I had before. If it's not, I do something similar. So here I find the key start for the user agent. And if we look at a request here, so here's the user agent. So I'm going to insert it right after that. I figured every request is going to have this header, and it's kind of just a good place to fall after it. You could, of course, put in whatever you wanted. Next, I define the end, and I use the same logic by checking the new bytes. Then I made the request, and I glued it all together. The only thing I changed is I didn't want it to start at the start, right? Because that would replace user agent. I wanted it to start at the end, but I also needed to include the length of the new line bytes. So you've got the user agent header and then the new line bytes. Then we insert the new header, and then we add the rest of the request in. Once all of that was put together, now if I go here and delete the header altogether and send this, boom, you can see it gets added and we get the secret content. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. It was a good project for me. I definitely learned a lot. I don't create very many, burp extensions, so it was interesting. It didn't take too long actually to work all this out and get it working, which is awesome. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Goodbye.